All right, students, I'm going to start moving you shortly. I'm going to hop over to Chambers and talk to them quickly. And then when I'm back, I will start moving you over into your courtroom. So just hang tight.
We have, let's see, this is Team PV versus Team UJ. And so Team PV, you are playing the plaintiff, correct? Is there a captain for Team PV?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Great, okay, thank you. And Team UJ, you are a defendant. Are you prepared to go ahead as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, great. So just a few matters, which I'm sure you guys are becoming well familiar with. Non-performing participants, coaches, and observers are asked to mute both audio and video during the trial. Is either team planning to record the trial?
I believe so, Your Honor.
Okay, so in Team UJ, do you have any objections if the trial is recorded?
Your Honor, we actually do want to record as well too, so no objections.
Okay, great. So we will be recording the trial. And just a reminder to whoever may be listening and watching that you are permitted to be in this courtroom only if you are associated with one of the performing teams. So everyone here should be with Team PV or Team UJ. The teams are reminded that they may use only the information that's in the materials that have been provided or things that can be reasonably inferred from that. Time limitations will be observed. I am kind of a stickler for time, so I am not going to grant any additional time if somebody goes over time. And also, timekeepers, I'm sure you're aware of this, the timekeeping will stop during objections. Are the timekeepers both prepared? Can you make yourselves known here?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. And as both teams know, all witnesses must be called. The only exhibits that can be used are the exhibits provided in the materials. I am assuming all the students have read the mock trial rules and the code of ethical conduct. And everyone's agreeing to abide by those. And so let's see, one other, just one comment, just so that you know, if there are objections that are raised during a witness examination or at any point in the trial, I will ask both sides to comment on those, generally speaking. So it won't be a situation where you say object and I will rule and the other side will not have an opportunity to speak. You will have an opportunity to speak. The downside of that is you should be prepared to speak and defend the question that you're asking or the thing that's being objected to. All right, so let's start with team introductions. We'll have plaintiff go first. So Ms. Coletti, are you doing introductions, or however your team is doing introductions? You can go ahead and proceed with that.
Sorry. Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Chloe Coletti, and I will be representing Team PV for the plaintiff, and I will be conducting the opening statement as well as the cross-examination of Marlo Navarro. I would like to introduce our lawyers at this time, starting with Jack Barrow, who will conduct the direct examination of Plaintiff Jersey Jackson, Iris Reverbell, who will conduct the direct examination of Danger Smith, Cole Fettkeather, who will conduct the direct examination of Dr. Trini Redbird, as well as the cross-examination of Camden Buchanan, Luke Fettkeather, who will conduct the cross-examination of Eden Saab, and Allison Corcoran, who will provide the closing statement. And I will also introduce our witnesses. Ainsley Law will portray witness Jersey Jackson, and she uses she, her pronouns. Rylan Copperman will portray Danger Smith, and he uses he, him pronouns. And Hildy Harrington will portray Dr. Trini Redbird, and she uses she, her pronouns. And our timekeeper will be Kate Bingham.
Thank you. And defense.
Yes.
Go ahead. Rose, are you doing that then?
Yes.
Thank you.
So my name is Rose Bondor, and at this time, I'd like to introduce my co-counsel. At this time, I'm introducing my co-counsel, Nausicaa Cronwell, Ni Nguyen, Lon Deng, Ashley Pilari, Diana Liu, and Jezreel God. And now our witnesses, Hal Tran as Marlon Navarro, Jana Brown as Camden Buchanan, and Eden Stubbs as Eden Saab. And our timekeeper, Sammy Call.
Great, thank you very much. So we will now swear in the witnesses. So I would ask all the witnesses to appear and raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? So let's hear it.
I do.
Yes? Thank you.
I do.
I do.
All right, well, with all of that, we will proceed to opening statements. So plaintiff, you may begin with your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, my name is Chloe Coletti. May it please the court, counsel, and members of the jury. One of the first things we come to understand as Americans are our rights. We value freedom above all, and it is the basis of our entire system. We come to understand the importance of our First Amendment right to protected freedom of speech and assembly, and the importance of our Fourth Amendment right to be protected from unwarranted arrest. These messages of freedom are ingrained in all of us, and we all understand the importance of protecting them. Let me take you back to the 15th of January of 2020. It's a chilly morning in downtown Roe, Oregon, and a small group of peaceful protesters have assembled outside the historic landmark Digby Theater to protest its scheduled demolition. These peaceful protesters are surprisingly met with dozens of police, and bulldozers are poised to demolish this historic building. Among them is the plaintiff, Miss Jersey Jackson, who is there simply to report on the story for her newspaper. As she's there, Miss Jackson sees a protester grab something from the ground and aim to throw it at the delicate stained glass window of the Digby. So she immediately springs into action to grab this small stone and prevent this window from being shattered. Having prevented this potentially disastrous incident, Miss Jackson is tackled, arrested, and hauled off to jail. Members of the jury, we are here today because the arresting officer, defendant Marlon Navarro, violated Miss Jackson's First and Fourth Amendment rights by wrongfully and unlawfully arresting her. You will learn that defendant was not only targeting Miss Jackson in retaliation, but was also targeting fundamental constitutional rights. As the plaintiff, we have the burden to prove, by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that 1, Miss Jackson engaged in speech protected under the First Amendment. 2, that the defendant's arrest was substantially motivated by an effort to stop Miss Jackson from exercising these fundamental rights. And 3, the defendant arrested Miss Jackson without probable cause. There is no doubt that we will meet this burden today. Today, we the plaintiff will prove our case through 6 witnesses that we expect to testify. Plaintiff and journalist Miss Jersey Jackson will testify to her commitment to reporting the truth. She will walk you through the events of the first protest on the 20th of December of 2019, where she encountered Officer Navarro for the first time. She will testify that she had the courage to stand up to Officer Navarro, who was attempting to suppress protesters' rights to protest. And this act of resistance placed a target on her back for future retaliation. Protester Danger Smith will testify to Officer Navarro's bias towards Miss Jackson, as well as that he was the one holding the rock and Miss Jackson stopped him. Expert audiologist Dr. Trini Redbird will testify as to what the defendant most likely could and could not have heard at the protest. Defense witnesses will most likely confuse the issues or offer excuses. Defendant Marlon Navarro will have to testify to knowing that Miss Jackson was a member of the press. As defendant testifies, listen for any evidence that supports defense's claim that Miss Jackson was aiming, throwing, or using the rock in any way to incite damage. Further, this rock that defendant Navarro claims to have seen was only about 1.5 inches long, and the officer was over 100 feet away. And additionally, officer claims to have been able to see this tiny rock, but not Miss Jackson's shirt identifying her as press. Camden Buchanan, the owner of the Digby Theater, will testify to no more than financial motivation and ties to the Rowe Police Department. And finally, Eden Saab will testify, or a member of the local Citizen Review Committee will testify to having no experience as a police officer and offer no information relevant to this case. After this unlawful arrest, Ms. Jackson was left frustrated knowing her fundamental rights have been targeted in retaliation simply for doing her job. Today, I have full confidence that you, the jury, will see the truth in Officer Navarro's targeting and retaliatory actions and hold Officer Navarro liable. Thank you.
Thank you, defense. You may proceed.
Unsafe situations require immediate action. On January 15th, during the second protest about the demolition of the Digby Theater, Officer Marlo Navarro heard someone yell that they should barricade themselves in the Digby Theater. And when he looked over, he saw Jersey Jackson holding a rock and did what anyone who's committed to keeping the public safe. This case is about the defendant, Marlo Navarro, executing a justified arrest of the plaintiff, Jersey Jackson, because of the immediate danger Jersey Jackson posed on the peaceful protest. Unsafe situations require immediate action. Jersey Jackson has fantasized about breaking a big story and becoming a renowned journalist. Miss Jackson has a thing for the dramatics and has an ulterior motive of furthering her career. Danger Smith maliciously engaged with police and decided to pick up a rock to throw into the building he was trying to protect. When Miss Jackson was arrested for his crime, he decided to walk away. With audiology being an inexact science, Miss Redbird cannot be 100% sure whether or not Marlo Navarro couldn't have heard Jersey Jackson or Danger Smith. Trini Redbird simply can't make a call either way. Marlo Navarro was just doing his job to keep the protesters safe and keep the protest peaceful. Marlo Navarro is committed to keeping the public peace, and that often means having to make quick decisions for an unsafe situation. Camden Buchanan, the property developer, saw that the building was structurally unsound, and with both building inspectors confirming her ideas, Camden Buchanan didn't want to demolish the Digby Theater without preserving the historic glass windows. And Eden Saab, an expert in community policing and RPD policy, states that Rose Police Department crowd control verifies that if there is a threat of property damage or disturbing the peace, the officer can arrest without 2 warnings. In this case, we will see Jersey Jackson, whose main drive is to become a well-known journalist, Danger Smith, who left someone to take the fall for his crime, and Trini Redbird, who comes with an inexact science, which will never make her 100% sure that Mr. Navarro couldn't have heard Jersey Jackson and Danger Smith, while Marlo Navarro was just doing his job to keep the public peace. Camden Buchanan, who is an eyewitness wanting to preserve the Digby Theater, Eden Saab, who taught Navarro how to deal with a threat of peace. This is a tense situation that could have spiraled out of control. Unsafe situations require immediate intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, counsel. Plaintiff may call the first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Jersey Jackson to the stand. Okay. Good evening, Ms. Jackson.
Good evening.
Where do you work?
I work as a journalist for the Rogonian.
And how long have you been a journalist?
I've been a journalist for the past 8 years, but I've been with the Rogonian for about 1.5 years now.
Okay. I'd like to take you back to late 2019. What happened on the state?
In December of 2019, I heard from a fellow journalist that the owner of the Digby Theater, Camden Buchanan, actually had plans to demolish the theater. But in order to do so, an inspection would have to deem that the building was structurally unsound because it's on the Registry of Historical Places.
And What did you do with this info?
I immediately wrote up a story which was published in the Oregonian.
And was there any public response to this story?
Yes, the public was in an uproar. I mean, they were calling for protests to protect the theater. And I must say that I was proud that my writing was able to have such an impact on our community.
And was there eventually a protest?
Yes, on December 20th of 2019.
And did you
Or
attend
twenty-
this protest? Sorry, did you attend this protest?
Yes, I did. I wanted to follow up on my story.
And when you arrived at this protest, what was the scene?
I would say that things were peaceful, but definitely tense. There was a line of police, there was about 30 to 40 protesters holding signs and chanting and things like that. And there was also a line of police positioned outside of the fence surrounding the theater.
And did you interview anyone when you arrived?
I tried, but most of the protesters actually ignored me, except for Danger Smith, who called me over for an interview.
And what happened while you were talking to Danger Smith?
Well, Danger had just started to speak into my phone when I felt a hard hand clamp down on my shoulder, and I turned around to see a police officer.
And did you ever find out who this police officer was?
Yes, I didn't know at the time, but I soon learned that this was Officer Navarro.
Did Officer Navarro say anything to you?
Yes, he said something along the lines of, "Don't make me arrest you, just clear out now and we won't have a problem."
How did you respond to this statement?
I mean, I was shocked. Danger and I were just standing on the sidewalk doing nothing illegal, which I told Officer Navarro.
And what happened after this confrontation?
Well, in response to my article, the city council agreed that there would need to be a second inspection done of the Digby Theater, so we were all able to leave peacefully that day.
And what did you do after that?
I wrote an article which was published in the Oregonian on January 10th.
Okay. Your Honor, I now like to introduce Exhibit 5 into evidence. My teammate will screen share it now. Ms. Jackson, can you please identify this article?
This is the article that I wrote following the first protest.
The witness has identified the exhibit, and now like to offer it into evidence.
Defense, do you have any objection to the entry of Exhibit 5 into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor, I object to hearsay, as this is an out-of-court statement.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Mr. Barrow, do you have a response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 801C, I'm not using this for the truth of the matter asserted. I'm using this for the effect on a listener, and reader, and in this case, it'd be Officer Marlon Navarro.
Okay, given that it's being not offered for the truth of the matter asserted, I will overrule the objection, and the exhibit 5 is accepted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Jackson, what is this article about?
This article is about what happened at the first protest where protesters and law enforcement clashed, and also the fact that there was a second inspection done of the theater and a new demolition date for January 15th of 2020 was set.
And did you ever mention the police in this article?
I did, but they declined to comment when I reached out.
Okay. And again, Ms. Jackson, whose name is in the byline?
That's my name, Jersey Jackson.
My teammate can now remove the screenshot from their screen.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barrow, I couldn't understand what you just said. Would you repeat that, please?
Sorry, I'm just telling my teammate to remove the exhibit.
Oh, okay, there you go. Great. Just the sound issue, you know.
What happened after this article was published?
Well, there was calls for a second protest to protect the Digby Theater.
And was there a protest?
Yes, on January 15th of 2020.
And did you go to this protest?
Yes, I mean, I wanted to follow up on my story.
And when you arrived at this protest, what was the scene?
I would say that things were much more chaotic than last time. There were more protesters and more police. And instead of holding signs and chanting, the protesters were yelling, and the police were decked out in full riot gear.
And again, did you approach anyone for an interview?
Yes, I actually recognized Danger Smith in the crowd, so I decided to approach him again.
Okay. And was Danger Smith doing anything when you approached him?
Yes, I actually saw Danger backing away from the crowd, saying something like, "They can't tear down the Digby if we're inside."
Your Honor, this is hearsay.
Sorry. May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry. Under 801C, again, I am not using this for the truth of the matter asserted. I am just using this for the fact that that Miss Jackson recognized that Danger Smith was backing away from the building and had a rock in his hand.
Okay, so would you repeat the testimony again, just so I can, Ms. Law, would you mind repeating the testimony that's at issue here?
Yes, Danger
Because I
was
don't have a
saying,
court stenographer who can, reporter who can play it back for me.
of course, Danger was saying they can't tear down the Digby if we're inside.
Okay, and Mr. Barry, your contention is that that's not being offered to prove that they can't tear it down. It's being offered to show perhaps
I'm
someone.
using it to offer the fact that Miss Jackson heard Danger Smith and saw the threat.
Okay,
On your honor.
yes, ma'am. Yes.
Council has just established that it's being offered for the fact that Jersey Jackson heard Danger Smith, and I still believe that makes it an out-of-court statement, which is still hearsay.
Okay, so it is an out-of-court statement. However, it appears to me that it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, which means it's not being offered to prove that what it's saying is actually true. It sounds like it's being offered to show someone's state of mind or the fact that a person saw or believed they saw something, not necessarily that the thing actually occurred. So I'm going to overrule your objection, and Mr. Barry, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Miss Jackson, I'm now going to repeat the question. What was Danger Smith doing when you approached him?
I actually saw Danger backing away from the crowd, saying something like, they can't tear down the Digby if we're inside.
And did Mr. Smith do anything after shouting to go inside the building?
Yes, I saw Danger grabbing a small rock and getting ready to throw it through the front door of the building.
And did you do anything in response to Mr. Smith's threat?
Yes, I ran up yelling stop, and I grabbed the rock out of Danger's hand.
Your Honor, I now like to offer Exhibit 1 into evidence. My teammate will screen share it now. Miss Jackson, can you please identify this article?
This is the rock that I grabbed out of Danger Smith's hand.
Your Honor, the witness has identified this exhibit, and I like to offer it into evidence.
Defense counsel, do you have any objection to the entry of this exhibit into evidence?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, Exhibit 1 is accepted into evidence.
Miss Jackson, how large is this rock?
It's actually quite small. It's only about 2 inches long and 1.5 inches wide.
And what happened after you took the rock from Mr. Smith?
Well, I was just standing next to Danger when someone came up from behind me, grabbed me, tackled me to the ground, and arrested me.
And did you ever learn who arrested you?
Yes, I soon learned that this was Officer Navarro who had arrested me.
And were you doing anything different at this protest than the first one?
Yes, at this protest, I was wearing a bright blue t-shirt that said press in big yellow letters on both sides so that the police would easily be able to distinguish me from the protesters.
My teammate can now remove this screen share from their screen. What happened after you were arrested?
I was hauled off to the Row Police Station where I was held for a few hours before being released.
And were you ever able to finish your story?
No, I mean, when Officer Navarro arrested me, he prevented me from doing my job. And by the time I was released from the police station, the protest was long over, so there was no way I could report on what had happened.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Ms. Bondar, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Jackson, you're currently working as a journalist for the Oregonian, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And as a journalist, you attended the Digby Theater protest on January 15th of 2020 to further that coverage for your story. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, you could describe this protest, unlike the last one, as anything but calm. Is that right?
Yes, I do say that.
You even witnessed protesters chaining themselves to fences. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, at 10 a.m., the bulldozers powered on, and the police informed attendees that if they did not disperse, they would be subject to arrest for trespassing. Is that right?
I did hear that, yes.
However, you decide to stay, disobeying police orders and risking getting arrested to continue your coverage. Is that right?
I had to make a journalistic decision, and I figured since I was easily distinguishable as a journalist, it wouldn't be a problem.
So that's a yes. You decide to stay, disobeying police.
Yes, I did stay.
And as you approach the fence of violent protesters, you then heard Danger Smith yell through the crowd for protesters to barricade themselves inside the theater. Is that correct?
Yes, and then Danger grabbed a rock and looked like he was going to throw it through the front door.
And you were horrified, so you yelled stop and took that rock out of their hand. Is that correct?
Yes, I didn't want anyone to escalate the situation.
In that moment, Officer Navarro arrested you. Is that right?
Yes, shortly after, as I was just standing there.
Now, before that arrest, you had received a warning to disperse. Is that a yes?
Yes.
And at the time of the arrest, you were holding a rock, correct?
Yes, but I wasn't in any position to throw said rock.
So at the time of the arrest, you were facing Digby Theater's glass stained doors with that rock in your hand. Is that correct?
I was facing slightly left so that the door was on my right and the rock was in my right hand, and I wasn't in any position to throw it.
But you were facing Digby Theater's glass stained doors with the rock in your hand.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any or redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Did Officer Navarro say anything after he arrested you?
Yes, he said something like, "You again, huh? I bet you weren't doing anything illegal this time either."
And did he ever mention the rock in your hand?
No, he never mentioned the rock when he arrested me.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross? Ms. Bonder, any questions?
No recross, Your Honor.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Law, Ms. Jackson, you may step down. Okay, so we're going to take about 30 to 60 seconds to allow the scoring judges to update their forms and enter comments.
I'm ready to move forward.
Both of the scoring judges had enough time to enter any comments. Thank you. All right, we will proceed with the second witness. Plaintiff, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls witness Danger Smith to the stand. And again, my name is Iris Weaverbell. Good evening, Mr. Smith.
Hey, how's it going?
I'd like to start by asking you 3 background questions. How do you spend your time?
Well, I spend a lot of my time. I go to protests and I send letters to our governor and then our senators. I'm just trying to get my voice out there, and I just can't stand if I can't make my voice heard.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, obviously I can't do that for a living. So I work at this coffee shop here in Rowe.
So what is your connection with today's case?
I mean, I was at the 2 protests that were at the Digby Theater, and then I also know Jersey.
What were you trying to accomplish protesting at the Digby Theater?
Well, we were trying to stop the money-grubbing developer from tearing it down, like the beautiful building.
I understand the date of the first protest was December 20th in 2019. Can you describe the scene at this protest?
Yeah, so when we got there, everything was still getting set up. And so, I just, we were talking about what chant we were going to do. We came up with "Don't Demolish the Digby," which I thought it was okay.
Were there police officers there?
Oh, yeah, there were a whole bunch. I'd say 40 to 50.
Ms. Jackson has testified that she was at this protest. Did you see her there?
Yes, I did.
And what did you observe her doing?
Well, she was going down the line of protesters asking for statements for her article.
And did she ask you for a statement?
Yeah, she did.
And did you end up giving her one?
Well, I was in the process of giving her one, but then Navarro came up behind her and slammed his hand on her shoulder.
Did Officer Navarro say anything when he slammed his hand on Ms. Jackson's shoulder?
Yeah, he said don't make me arrest you, Danger.
And how did Ms. Jackson respond to being grabbed from behind?
Well, I mean, she was furious. I would too if I got my shoulder grabbed from behind me by someone I didn't know. She turned around and yelled at him.
And did Officer Navarro respond to Ms. Jackson's comments?
Yeah, he needed to take a breather for a second, and then he told us that if we didn't leave, we'd get arrested.
So did you leave?
Well, yeah, we did, because the bulldozer stopped anyway, because apparently the permit got revoked, which is great. That means we won.
So what happened to the Digby Theater after the protest?
Well, I mean, we thought that it was saved, but then the developer, he somehow got another permit to demolish it.
And I understand the date of this second protest was January 15th of 2020. Can you describe the scene at this protest?
Yeah, when I got there, I could already feel that things were a lot more tense, because it was kind of scary almost.
Were there police officers there?
Yeah, about the same amount, like 40 to 50, and it was really scary because there's only a dozen of us protesters.
And what were the police officers wearing?
They were wearing full riot gear against a dozen protesters.
What did the riot gear look like?
Well, they had these scary masks on, and they had these big plastic shields and bulletproof vests as if we could shoot them with our signs that we were holding.
So how did you feel your protest efforts were progressing?
Well, it didn't seem to be going very well. There were people that were leaving, people were getting arrested. I was getting really frustrated.
And did you act on these feelings of frustration?
Yeah, I noticed this like tiny rock that was on the ground next to me, and I had this stupid thought that maybe I could throw it through the front door of the theater and get in. It's a really stupid idea.
So did you end up throwing the rock?
No, I didn't, because Jersey Jackson came up behind me and grabbed the rock out of my hand, thankfully. I would have done something really stupid there.
What was Miss Jackson wearing?
She was wearing this blue shirt that had yellow letters on it, like big yellow letters on it that said press. You couldn't miss it.
And how big was the rock?
It's tiny, like inch and a half.
Objection, Your Honor.
Proceed. Oh, Ms. Lou, you're frozen or something.
The statement that the witness said, the statement that the witness said about the shirt being unmissable would be under Rule 403. The probative value is substantially outweighed by the danger of the optometrist here. The witness would not, this would be lack of personal knowledge. The witness would not be able to say with certainty whether or not the other witnesses there or other characters there would be able to see the bright yellow letters on the blue shirt.
Okay, Ms. Weaver-Bell, do you have a response to that?
Yes, the witness just volunteered that piece of information to illustrate how large and prominent the letters were. And although he is not an optometrist, he could still see how big the letters were, and it's reasonable extrapolation that anybody with clear eyesight could see it.
Do you have a response to that, Ms. Lou?
May I respond? Yes, the witness would be able to speak for themselves, but they cannot speak for other people, and that would be lack of personal knowledge on their side, seeing that they are not able to go into research and see to what extent the shirt is visible to other people around them.
So the exact testimony that's being objected to, Mr. Copperman said, excuse me, Mr. Danger. What's Danger? Well, I can't remember what your last name is, but it's a great name, Danger. Said that the shirt was in fact seen by others, or that it had bright yellow letters and it was therefore
it was. Sorry, they stated that it would unmissable.
I think that's a reasonable thing. For a reasonable person can come to that conclusion. I'm going to overrule your objection. You may proceed, Ms. Weaver-Bell.
I'll re-ask my question. And about how big was this rock?
I mean, it was tiny. It was like an inch and a half inches, sorry, 1.5 inches, like this big.
So Miss Jackson, clearly labeled as press, grabbed the inch and a half rock from you, and then what happened?
Well, I mean, out of nowhere from behind her, Navarro went and tackled her and arrested her.
And did he say anything during this arrest?
Yeah, he said that, like, oh, it's you again. And I guess you're going to say you weren't doing anything illegal too, like something snappy like that.
What did you do after Miss Jackson was tackled and arrested?
Well, I mean, it just really shocked me. She wasn't doing anything. And so I didn't want to get arrested too. So I left.
And did you see Officer Navarro make any other arrests before you left?
No, I did not.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Mr. Smith. No further questions.
Defense counsel, you may proceed.
Danger Smith, you've known Officer Navarro from previous protests you've attended, right?
Yeah, I've met her there before.
And you've described Officer Navarro as someone that is pretty friendly to protesters.
Yeah,
Objection, improper character evidence.
So the question, I'm unclear as to the question. Ms. Liu, you're asked, Ms. Liu, tell me exactly what you're objecting to that constitutes improper character evidence. Ms. Weaver-Bell?
Oh, yes. She asked if Mr. Smith had observed him being friendly to other protesters.
And we're talking about Officer Navarro?
Yes.
Okay, and so you are suggesting
May
that.
I respond?
Yes, please.
I'm just merely laying down the foundation of the case in chronological order for the jury to understand it easier. And I'm just asking these questions to see if these are how the events played out. And I'm not trying to prove the officer's character.
So you're suggesting the character of a, I think I'm going to overrule the objection and go ahead and allow that question. You may proceed, Ms. Liu.
And you've described Officer Navarro as someone who is pretty friendly to protesters before.
Yeah, I'd say that. She was nice to me at least, at first.
Do you recall telling Officer Navarro, why do you have to be such a buzzkill?
Yeah, but it was just a joke. I'm pretty sure that he noticed that too.
And you do recall that Officer Navarro replied, but what you're doing just isn't safe, and it's my job to make sure that you and your friends can protest without someone getting hurt.
Objection, hearsay.
Are you objecting to the officer's speech?
May I respond?
Yeah. I want to be clear exactly what you're objecting to, Ms. Weaver-Bell, when you say which is the hearsay part.
Officer Navarro's statement is hearsay.
Okay, and Ms. Liu, what is your response to that?
I'm asking how these are the events that played out, and also I'm trying to prove the intent, not the character, which is something that is not a part of character evidence.
Okay, and hearsay doesn't have to do with character evidence. So Ms. Weaver-Bell, you're saying that there was an out-of-court statement, and then that was the officer's statement, and you're saying that Ms. Liu is offering that statement to prove it is true. Is that what you're saying when you're objecting to hearsay?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the statement,
I'm just asking if the witness recalls having heard that. I'm not trying to prove anything else other than that.
okay, and then what is the purpose of that testimony then? If not to prove
I'm
it's
trying
true.
to see if the witness remembers that, because if they do remember it, wouldn't they agree that not hoping people not to get hurt fall under worrying about safety?
Okay, so what it sounds like what you're saying is that you're offering this testimony to show that or to explore the way in which it affected Mr. Smith, not to prove that it was necessarily true. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, in that case, I'm going to overrule the objection. You may proceed.
Yes. So do you recall Officer Navarro replying to your statement with that other statement?
Yes, I do.
And you would agree that hoping people not to get hurt fall under worrying about their safety.
I mean, yeah, I'd say that.
Moving forward to the first Digby Theater protest on December of 2019. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Jersey Jackson was the one who told you about the first protest at the Digby Theater.
Yeah, that's correct.
And you went to the protest because you saw it as an injustice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. Like it's an injustice that a beautiful building is going to get demolished like that.
And you made plans to attend it right after being informed.
Yes, I did.
But you didn't know it was a reconstruction and not a demolition?
I mean, does a reconstruction include demolishing the building with bulldozers?
But you didn't know it was a reconstruction and not a demolition. Is that a yes or no?
I mean, I guess that's a yes.
You were also present at the second protest of the Digby Theater, right?
Yes, I was.
And you were the one that made the threat about barricading the building, and you were about to carry on with that threat.
Yes, I was. I mean, it was a stupid idea, but yes.
And then Jersey Jackson stopped you, right?
Yes, she did.
But Officer Navarro rushed over and arrested them.
Yeah, that from behind her, he tackled her.
Right, yeah. But did you tell Officer Navarro that it was actually you who made the threat?
Well, no, No, I did not.
Right, and did you try to explain the situation then?
No, he didn't ask me.
Right, so you just left the situation that you created?
Yes, I did. I mean, I didn't want to get arrested.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Smith, did Officer Navarro ask you or ask anyone to clarify what happened or say anything about the rock?
No, he did not.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any recross? Ms. Lewis. Ms. Lou, are you there? Is there any recross? I do not see her, so I'm taking that for a no.
Oh, sorry, no, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, and Mr. Smith has stepped down. We will take 30 seconds to allow our judges to update their score sheets and comment sheets. Okay, plaintiffs, you may call your third witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, plaintiff calls Dr. Trini Redbird to the stand. Again, my name is Cole Fetkether.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Redbird.
Good evening.
What is your connection to this case?
Well, I'm an audiologist who has been asked to testify and investigate on whether Officer Navarro would have been able to hear and comprehend a statement made by Danger Smith during the second protest.
Can you tell me a bit about your line of work?
Yes, I'm an audiologist, meaning I focus on a variety of different things involving hearing and balance. It's kind of a mix of neuroscience and physics.
And do you have any education in this field?
Yes, I graduated from Stanford Medical School with a PhD and a medical degree in audiology and hearing sciences.
Have you ever published any research?
Yes, I regularly publish medical journals and I speak at well-known medical conferences as well.
And is this your first time testifying in a court case?
No, I have testified and have been qualified as an expert witness in about 6 court cases.
Now, Dr. Redbird, how is audiology relevant to this case?
Well, I was asked to determine whether Officer Navarro would have been able to hear and comprehend a statement made by Dangersmith during the second protest.
And where and when did all of this take place?
This happened on January 15th, 2020 in Rowe, Oregon.
Dr. Redbird, in a moment, what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4 will be shared by my colleague. Can you please identify Exhibit 4 for the court?
Yes, this is the area map of the January 15th protest.
Is it to scale?
This map is not to scale, but I received all of the measurements from Officer Navarro's affidavit.
Does it roughly represent where each individual was located during the protest?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, we offer Exhibit 4 into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Thank you. Plaintiff counsel, do you have any objection to admission of Exhibit 4?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Exhibit 4 is entered into evidence.
Thank you. Dr. Redbird, can you use Exhibit 4 to lay out the scene of the protest?
Yes, as you can see near the middle of the screen in the lower portion of the road, there is a yellow dot that represents where Dangersmith and Jersey Jackson were standing. And across the street, about 100 feet away, is where Officer Navarro is standing. And then about 50 feet away from Officer Navarro, there is a rectangle in the parking lot that represents where the bulldozers were located.
And how do you measure the sounds going on around all these people?
Well, in the field of audiology, we use decibels to measure sound.
Is it common for other audiologists to rely on similar measurements?
Yes, it is.
And are the measurements you use for this case based off of well-founded scientific literature?
Of course.
So, Dr. Redbird, in your expert opinion, how loud the bulldozers have been in decibels?
Well, these bulldozers would have been around 100 to 120 decibels.
And can you give a real-life example of what that sound level would be?
Yes, this would be equivalent to standing next to a loud jackhammer.
And then, Dr. Redbird, how loud is the typical human yell?
Well, the typical human yell is around 70 to 90 decibels.
Would it be safe to assume, for the purpose of this case, that Dangersmith's yell was around 80 decibels?
Yes, it would.
And can you give an example of what 80 decibels would be like?
Yes, 80 decibels is just the typical human yell.
Now, Dr. Redbird, how does the volume of sound change as distance increases?
Well, the volume of sound changes based on something called the inverse law, meaning as you double the distance from a point of sound, you subtract 6 decibels from that sound.
And based on this scientific rule, how loud would the sound of the bulldozers be by the time that it reached Officer Navarro?
Well, these bulldozers would have been around 92 decibels by the time they reached Officer Navarro.
Can you put 92 decibels into perspective?
Yes, 92 decibels would be in between a bustling intersection and a loud jackhammer.
And then how loud would Dangersmith's yell by the time it reached Officer Navarro?
Dangersmith's yell would be around 56 decibels by the time it reached Officer Navarro.
Can you put 56 decibels into perspective?
Yes, 56 decibels is just a normal conversational tone.
Thank you. My colleague may now remove Exhibit 4 from the screen. And Dr. Redbird, do decibels increase at a linear rate?
No, they do not.
And what do you mean by this?
Well, because they don't increase at a linear rate, sounds get exponentially larger the greater the difference in between decibels.
So, based on this rule, how many times louder would the 92 decibel bulldozers seem than the 56 decibel yell of Danger Smith?
Well, the bulldozers would be nearly 4,000 times louder than Danger Smith's yell.
And with the bulldozers being nearly 4,000 times louder than Danger Smith's yell, would that make it harder for Officer Navarro to hear what Danger Smith had said?
It certainly would.
And were there any other factors that could have impacted Officer Navarro's hearing?
Yes, there were two other main factors. The first one being that Danger Smith was facing the Digby Theater and essentially yelling into the Digby Theater. And if you kind of look at this with common sense, you can understand that it's going to be incredibly harder to have a conversation with someone when you're not facing each other, rather than having that same conversation facing each other. And then the other factor is that there were other protesters around Danger Smith. And because the human yell has a similar pitch, all of these yells can kind of get mixed together, and that can make it increasingly harder for someone to hear and comprehend one of those yells.
Now, Dr. Redbird, in your expert opinion, and having considered all the factors in this case, how likely is it that Officer Navarro was actually able to hear and comprehend what Danger Smith had said?
It is extremely unlikely that Officer Navarro would have been able to hear, let alone comprehend, what Danger Smith had said.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Defense counsel, can you just enlighten me as to the pronunciation of your last name, please?
God.
God, okay, there you go. Ms. God, you may proceed.
Ms. Trini Redbird, now you are a scientist who specializes in audiology, correct?
Yes.
And this is your first time testifying in a civil rights case.
Yes, but I've testified on very similar other cases.
And you are here today because Jersey Jackson's lawyers asked you to.
Yes.
And you hope that this opportunity will lead to more opportunities in the future.
Well, of course, I like using my expertise as an audiologist. It's an experience that I enjoy doing.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
Moving on. Now, audiology is an inexact science, right?
Well, of course, most sciences are.
So yes.
Yes.
And to figure out if Officer Navarro actually heard the comment, you used estimations from Officer Navarro's affidavit.
Yes.
And you were not in any of the protests.
Well, as an audiologist, I couldn't really be there. So I didn't attend any of the protests, no.
And you were not able to locate any recordings.
Well, there was a recording, but it was completely unreliable for my investigation.
Along with not being able to locate any recordings, you also did not conduct an in-person interview.
I did not, but there was nothing that really led me to believe Officer Navarro's hearing would be anything but average. And there wasn't any information that wasn't supplied in Officer Navarro's affidavit.
And because you did not conduct an in-person interview, you can't say with complete certainty that Officer Navarro actually heard the comment.
There's always going to be uncertainty, but I'm here to testify on the probability of Officer Navarro hearing Danger Smith, which is extremely unlikely.
But it is still possible that Officer Navarro actually heard the comment.
Like I said, anything's possible, but the actual audiological probability is incredibly unlikely.
So that's a yes.
Yes, anything's possible.
Thank you, Your Honor. That'll be all.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Redbird, can you talk a bit more about why you didn't use the recording provided by Camden Buchanan?
Yes, I didn't use the recording because it was incredibly unreliable, and it wasn't sufficient for me to rely on in my investigation.
And Also, can you talk about how you used a range of data to account for uncertainty in this case?
Yes, because I wasn't actually able to measure Officer Navarro's hearing ability or Danger Smith's yell, I used a range of data to account for any uncertainty that might occur.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Doctor, you may step down.
Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take another 30 seconds and then the defense can begin calling their witnesses. Defense counsel, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Defense like to call Marlon Navarro to the stand.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Officer Navarro. Now, tell us about yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Marlon Navarro. I am 33 years old and have been working at Royal Police Department for like 8 years.
And why are you here today?
I got accused by Jersey Jackson because I violated her institutional right, and however I was there just to do my job, to make sure the situation under control and make sure that everyone is safe.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about the first protest on December 28th, 2019. What were you doing at that protest?
I actually got a call from Karen Buchanan about the protest that likely to occur on the demolition day of the Digby Theater. I was glad to hear that the protesters were out there was demonstrating the First Amendment right to stand up on what they believe in. I feel really supportive of this protest myself as well because I love the Digby Theater. However, I was there to ensure the safety of the people, make sure none of these protesters' First Amendment right get violated.
Okay, and what was the atmosphere like at this first protest?
The atmosphere was tense. I mean, as police officer, that's how we usually imagine every protest supposed to look like. People were linking arms, marching down the street, and essentially blocking the traffic.
And how did you react to that situation?
I want to get the situation under control before it can get escalated. So I thought I could start with approaching protesters and ask them to move out the street. And along the way, I saw Danger Smith. And Danger Smith to me like a 60 radical guy, great personality and crazy personality and really fun to talk to sometimes. So I approached Danger and I say something along the line of, "Hey, don't make me arrest you again, Danger." And I winked. He smiled back and seemed to get the joke. At the same time, I put my hand on Jersey's shoulder. It was really gentle. I mean, there's something you would do with a friend or a pal. It is like a human-to-human interaction. But now looking back, I didn't know Jersey at the time, and I really apologize for doing so.
Okay, now moving on to the second protest on January 15, 2020. What were you doing at this second protest?
At this point, I mostly forgot about the first protest since everything went really smooth or nothing really big happened. It was basically the same deal. I got a call from Buchanan. I need to be there to ensure the safety of the protester.
Okay, and you showed up at this protest, correct?
Yes, I did.
And what was the atmosphere like at this second protest compared to the first one?
Compared to the first one, man, the protest was definitely more intense, dangerous, and chaotic. The protesters were yelling at police officers. They were angry. For instance, this lady came up to me, make an oink sound, asking how can I even sleep at night, knowing that I'm waiting for the man. I mean, as police officer, you cannot put your emotion on the job. That's why I didn't respond. At the same time, protesters were positioned themselves, surrounded the Digby Theater fence, and it was okay. I mean, nothing big deal. It was just demonstrating the First Amendment right to stand up on what they believe in. However, when some of them put themselves onto the fence and into the fence, I started to concern about the situation and about the safety of the people.
Okay, and how does the RPD handle these kind of situations?
There is the Directive 0635.10 that every police at rural police department has to follow.
At this time, my co-counsel is introducing Exhibit 2. Now, Officer Navarro, what is this document in front of you?
It is just directive that I have mentioned before. Is the rural police department crowd control admin policy.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, the defense like to enter Exhibit 2 into evidence. The authenticity of the exhibit has been stipulated.
It's counsel. Do you have any objection to that?
Yes, Your Honor. Objections on the ground of 802 hearsay and 403 relevance.
Your Honor, I'd like to first respond to the hearsay objection. Well, we recognize that this might be hearsay. We believe that there is an exception for this exhibit to be admitted, which is the records of regularly conducted activity. Since this is a record of a directive that the police department follows every day, we believe that that exception applies to this exhibit. Now, furthermore, I'd like to respond to the relevance objection. This document is relevant to the case today because Officer Navarro is going to talk about this, the procedures specifies on this directives. And once he goes over this directive, you see that his conduct aligns with the directive and the RPD.
Okay, so let's look first at the hearsay question. So hearsay is an out-of-court statement being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, which means it's being offered to prove it's true. So Ms. Coletti, can you tell me what in here you believe is a fact that Ms. Nguyen is attempting to prove using this document?
The statement itself, like the entire directive, is an out-of-court statement. Or an assertion written down, and to my understanding, opposing counsel is using it to establish that this statement is true and this is what the defendant follows.
So they're using it to establish, for example, that the rural police department recognizes the tradition of free speech assembly, rather than that it's being used to communicate to rural police officers that they are supposed to follow that. Is that what you're suggesting?
Kind of. I'm suggesting that they're using it just to establish that it's what, or they're using it to say that this is what police follow, regardless and consistently, and this is something that Officer Navarro followed.
Okay, Ms. Nguyen, do you have a response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. Again, we acknowledge that this document might be hearsay. We believe that the exception, give me 1 second. We believe that based on Rule 803, Section 6, records of regularly conducted activity, we believe that that exception applies to this document. Therefore, it can be admitted.
Okay, so my ruling as to the hearsay question is I do not believe this is hearsay, but because I do not believe it is being offered to prove the truth of anything being asserted in it. I'm not sure there is anything actually being asserted. I think there's a lot of stuff being recommended, but we can revisit that if they are going to, perhaps try to use it for that purpose. But to the extent it's not being used for that purpose, I'm going to allow it. Your second objection, Ms. Coletti, was relevance. Was that right? Or
yes, Your Honor. This statement, I believe, is more confusing or misleading to the jury as it dictates the policy or the recommended or policy that Rowe Police Department follows. But this case isn't about the specific Rowe policy. It's about a violation of constitutional rights, and therefore is a little confusing to the jury and does not hold as much probative value as it does prejudicial.
Okay, I don't believe it's particularly prejudicial.
That was a misspoken. It was just misleading compared to its probative value.
Okay. I think I'm going to allow it, and we will see if something incorrect is being, I think basically we're going to allow the exhibit. And I think some of these other issues we may perhaps address if they arise. But at this point, I don't see a reason not to accept it. So I think we will go ahead and enter exhibit number 2 into evidence, and you may proceed with your
Thank you.
examination, Ms. Wynn.
Now, what are the specific procedures on how to deal with suspected crimes that occur during demonstrations?
I have your attention to number 4, specific procedure. Every police officer have to understand that for suspected crime, the officer may make arrest only giving the suspect 2 verbal warning. However, for suspected crime of violence or property damage, an officer may make arrest if necessary to ensure the public safety.
And what was the police department response to this situation in that second protest?
The incident commander, or the IC, as we call her, recognized how quickly these unsafe situation can escalate it. That's why she announced that it was an unlawful assembly, and however, only 1 or 2 protesters left. So along my colleague, I was directed to start making arrests. Then somebody said, let's barricade the inside, then they can knock it down. I immediately turned around, saw a person with a bright t-shirt, have the rock on their hand, up on the air and facing toward the Digby Theater front door.
And so what did you do then?
At that time, the best course of action was to stop the person before they could damage the theater, allowing protesters to barricade themselves in, escalate the situation, and essentially put the protester life in danger. It was a totally unsafe situation. I couldn't just stand there and think. It required my immediate intervention. That's why I rushed to this person, grabbed their hand, and arrested them.
And so again, why did you arrest Jersey Jackson in the manner that you did?
It was an unsafe situation, like I say. It required my immediate action. And Jersey Jackson clearly posed a dangerous threat when she facing with the rock in her hand toward the Digby Theater front door, which was makeup stained class.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further question.
Ms. Colletti?
Your Honor, and again, my name, oh, you just said it, sorry.
It's great because there's name tags on here, so.
Good evening, Officer Navarro.
Good evening.
Officer, is it true that you lost your composure during an arrest, resulting in a complaint of excessive force?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Ms. Colletti, what's your response to that objection?
This piece of evidence or information is highly relevant as it establishes a prior incident of retaliatory intent, which is under 405B. Yeah, 405B is a specific instance with relevance to an essential claim of the case, in this case, retaliatory intent as demonstrated by his action of assaulting or hitting a detainee.
Okay, and Ms. Wynn, your objection is as to relevance, so
Yes.
I'm going to overrule that objection.
Well, I'd like to change my objection to improper use of character evidence, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, I'm not using this to prove that Officer Navarro acted in accordance with a specific trait at a certain time. I am instead under 404B using this as for one of the evidence's permitted uses, which is to establish absence of mistake or intent. And I'm doing so again through this specific instance of conduct under 405B that is relevant to an essential element of the case. In this case, it would be retaliatory intent.
Okay, Ms. Wynn, do you have a comment on that?
Your Honor, I stand by my response. I believe that the co-counsel is trying to use this evidence to prove that Officer Navarro has this trait and he acted accordingly with this trait at the second protest.
Okay, I'm going to allow the question. The objection's overruled.
Thank you.
I'm going to repeat the question. Officer, is it true that you lost your composure during an arrest, resulting in a complaint of excessive force?
I mean, it was like my first year police officer. It was a while ago, and yes, that was happening. What happened?
Thank you. And this happened while arresting someone for an attempted break-in, correct?
It happened like 8 years ago. Yeah, it was like a burglary. I think.
Thank you. And this was made after a comment about a potential wrongful arrest lawsuit, correct?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh, this was made after the suspect made a comment about a potential wrongful arrest lawsuit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And so you made sure that the suspect hit their head on the door of your vehicle. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just like my first year thing as my first year police officers. I really haven't any experience, but yeah, that what happened.
Thank you, Officer Navarro. Let's move on to your involvement with protests. Row policy is that everyone has a constitutional right to speak and assemble. Is that correct?
That is true.
And at the first protest, you testify that you became aware that Ms. Jackson was a member of the press. Is that correct?
I didn't aware, but like they were talking, making like journalistic comment. But
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, that's what I meant. And at the second, let's move on to the January protest. At this protest, you were positioned about 100 feet away from the protesters. Is that correct?
Yes, at first.
And from this position, you claim that you heard a threat to enter the building. Is that correct?
To barricade the building, to break it down and enter the building.
Thank you. And you claim you heard this statement over the sound of both bulldozers and protesters, correct?
Well, like it can be loud, but like it has constant thing. But like when somebody just yell that up, you can spot it out, right?
Thank you, officer. And from this position, you claim that you saw someone holding a rock. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you were about 100 feet away.
That is true.
Perfect. And this rock was only about 1.5 inches. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Perfect. And Officer Navarro, you do not mention the position of this person's arm, whether it was in a throwing or aiming position. Is that correct?
Can you?
You don't mention. You don't mention the position of this person's arm, meaning you state that they were holding this, but make no mention of the actual position or if they were aiming or throwing it. Is that correct?
I mean, their position is like they have the hand up on the air and their left kind of tilted a little bit. So their right hand facing the Digby Theater on the right.
Thank you, officer. And you also don't mention any other police or protesters reacting to this potential threat. Is that correct?
I mean, I first heard it. That's why I was had to like do it quickly before anything bad could happen.
So that's a no?
No.
Thank you. And officer, you would agree that it takes a period of at least a few seconds to run over 100 feet, especially in riot gear. Is that correct?
That's true.
And during this time, you make no mention of any attempts to verbally de-escalate the situation. Is that correct?
Can you clarify your question?
You make no mention in your statement of verbal attempts to stop this person before running over and immediately grabbing and arresting them. Is that correct?
No.
Thank you, Officer Navarro. No further questions.
Ms. Nguyen, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, how come you saw the rock in Jersey Jackson's hand and heard that comment that someone made about barricading themselves inside despite the chaotic environment that you were in?
We have so as a police officer, we have many type of trainings, and one of them is to spot the potential threat in these chaotic situations. So that is when I spot out the visual pathway to the person hand up on the air. That way, I'm only spot the 1.5 inches rock in that person hand.
Thank you. No further question, Your Honor.
And Ms. Clutty?
No recross, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Officer Navarro, you may step down. We'll take 30 seconds. Okay, defense counsel, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, defense would like to call witness Cannon Buchanan to the stand. Good evening, Ms. Buchanan.
Evening.
May you please introduce yourself to the jury, Ms. Buchanan?
Hello, my name is Candy Buchanan. I'm 54 years old. I'm the owner, chief executive officer, and founder of Buchanan Properties LLC. Here at Buchanan Properties, we renovate buildings. We take old or decrepit buildings and try to refurbish them and restore their charm.
What properties do you own?
I own a few properties around rural Oregon, including the very popular Digby Theater.
Why is the renovation of the Digby Theater needed?
Well, first of all, very sadly, around a year ago, a man was trampled to death at the Digby Theater during a concert. Partly because there are so few light and so little exits. So we're definitely planning on helping people, be able to find a way out of the building safely.
A tragedy. What complications have you ran into while attempting to renovate the Digby Theater?
Well, so far, an article journalist, whom I now know as Jersey Jackson, published an article for the Oregonian about how Ari Frankel, an inspector who has worked for Buchanan Properties for years and an associate of mine, was lying during their presentation about the Digby's structural unsoundness to the city council.
How did you plan to renovate the Digby Theater?
Well, first of all, we definitely want to refurbish some of the inside and exterior by putting in new windows, more exits, and then also adding a more sturdy structural skeleton.
How did you react to the calls for a protest regarding this renovation?
I felt a bit criminalized, honestly. I felt like I was doing the right thing and I was getting blamed for it. But I also felt like a bunch of the protesters there at the first protest did not know what was actually going to happen to the theater.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike outside of the scope of the mock trial materials.
You're talking about Ms. Dang, what is the specific portion that's outside the scope?
May I ask for the grounds for your objection, what you're specifically referring to for out of scope?
Yes, it was saying that the protesters did not understand what Ms. Buchanan's intent was. Nowhere in her statement does she state that those exact words.
I believe that Ms. Buchanan can testify to her own opinion.
I think I'm going to go ahead and sustain the objection. I don't know that it's particularly important information.
Okay. Where were you on December 20th, 2019, the day of the first protest?
On this day, I was actually at an appointment in Cascade County, so I couldn't be at the protest.
Was there any measures you decided to take since you couldn't be there?
I did call Leroy Police Department and ask them to send just a few officers to make sure the protest didn't get too out of hand.
And why did you ask for police reinforcement at the protest?
Well, in light of Jersey Jackson's article, I thought that people might get really riled up because it did seem pretty biased and only showed the bad parts about, Buchanan Properties.
Was there any news you received that day?
I got a phone call from my assistant who was attending the protest that the city council had decided to postpone the renovation of the Digby because in light of Jersey Jackson's article, people had been sending in very many complaints
about what was going to happen to the Digby Theater.
What actions did you take after receiving this news?
After this, I hired another inspector to inspect the Digby Theater and to present to the City Council what they found.
And what were their findings?
They were mostly the same as our Frankel's, and that the building was unsafe and should be refurbished for the safety of the public.
On the day of the second protest, January 15th, 2020, when did you arrive?
I arrived a few minutes before 10 a.m.
And what did you see when you arrived?
I mean, there were a few police officers and some protesters that were lining up around the Digby Theater and linking arms and chanting and whatnot.
What happened at around 10 a.m.?
Well, at this time, the bulldozers turned on and the renovation of the Digby was scheduled to start. And I also heard an officer yell through a microphone that the protesters should disperse or that they would be—
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike hearsay.
What's the specific testimony you're alleging is hearsay?
It was the announcement made by the police officers requesting that the protesters disperse.
So what is the, so Ms. Dang, do you have a comment, response to that?
Yes, this statement isn't being put into the record for the truth of the matter, how it's being put into the record to show how the protesters reacted instead of factual. What the announcement contained. Yeah.
Okay, I agree. I don't think that there is, the statement is being offered to prove any particular fact other than that it was said. What you are saying is being offered to show the effect on the listeners. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Would you like
You may
me to
proceed.
Ms. Buchanan, would you like me to restate the question?
Oh, yes, please.
What happened at around 10 a.m.?
So at this time, the bulldozers, they turned on and it was the beginning of the renovation, and I also heard a police officer yell through his microphone that the protesters should disperse or that they would be subject to arrest.
And how did they react to that announcement?
Well, I didn't see anybody leave, and I even saw a few people get out some chains and some locks and lock themselves to the fence.
Was there anything you decided to do at this time?
Well, yes, actually. I took out my phone and I started to record some of the audio that I was hearing. And I later wanted to send it to Roy going in to let them know a different side of the story.
Your Honor, at this time, my co-counsel will present Exhibit 3. May 10 seconds of this recording be played for recognition purposes only. Ms. Buchanan, do you recognize this recording?
Yes, I do. This is the recording that I took the day of the second protest.
Your Honor, at this time, Exhibit 3 has the authenticity of Exhibit 3 has been stipulated. May it be moved to evidence.
I'm fixing my view here. Mr. Fetkether, do you have any objection to the acceptance of Exhibit 3 into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor. I object under Rule 403. As Ms. Buchanan, or as she has not stated, we don't know what time this exhibit was recorded at or where she was standing. And I believe that it will mislead the jury and serve as having no probative value.
Ms. Dang, do you have a response to that?
I believe that that Ms. Buchanan has just mentioned around what time it was, and I don't believe that where she was standing is entirely relevant as long as she was in the sea of protesters.
Okay, Mr. Fetkether, I'm going to suggest that you explore those issues on cross-examination, if you wish, and I am going to accept the exhibits. So Exhibit 3 is received into evidence.
Ms. Buchanan, actually, can you play the full recording? Ms. Buchanan, how accurate would you say this representation is of what you heard at the scene?
Well, for the most part, it's pretty accurate, though it was recorded on an iPhone, and I'm not really sure that that's the most accurate representation of what I was hearing and what people around me were hearing, but it is basically similar.
After this recording, what occurred?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
After this recording, what happened after you recorded?
After this recording, I heard somebody yell that they were going to barricade themselves inside the Digby Theater, and I turned around because I was very worried, and I saw somebody in a blue t-shirt holding something, and they were faced toward the Digby Theater front glass doors, and this scared me a lot, so I yelled out very loudly that someone was going to barricade themselves inside the theater. And shortly after, maybe, a few seconds, an officer who I now know as Marlon Navarro swooped in and grabbed the person's hand or ankle or wrist and arrested them, which I am very thankful for, because without them, who would have known what would happen to the Digby front doors?
After this arrest, what were the remaining protesters doing?
Well, about that time, there weren't very many left, maybe just a few, and most of them were trying to get their locks off of the fence.
How did you feel after this whole ordeal?
There was definitely still a bunch of adrenaline pumping, but I felt relieved that nothing happened to the Digby and that we were able to renovate it safely when nobody got hurt.
Thank you for your time. Your Honor, at this time, I have no further questions.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Mr. Fatgather, you may cross-examine the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Ms. Buchanan.
Hello,
Your company owns the Digby Theater, correct?
that is correct.
And you say that this has been one of your trickiest properties to manage?
Yes,
And it would be in your best interest to tear down and reconstruct the theater?
oh, no, I would not want to do that. I would only want to do as much as I could to protect the people who are using the building.
But your plan is to tear it down and reconstruct it, correct?
Well, I don't know. I feel like that more fits the demolishing aspect of it. We just want to renovate it to where it is able to be used safely by the public.
Thank you. And you kept it open for nearly 8 years while it was unsafe, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you hired Ari Frankel to conduct a building inspection of the theater?
Yes,
You allowed her to label her report as independent?
I did not think that this would change the city council's decision, but yes,
But you do agree that it was a bit misleading, right?
I do.
Now, on to the second protest on January 15th, 2020. You called the police to be there, right?
I did.
You never mentioned anything to them that you were planning to save any part of the theater?
I'm sorry. Can you rephrase the question? I don't quite understand.
Yes, you never indicated that there were any parts of the theater, such as the stained glass doors, that you were planning to keep after renovation?
I don't believe that I came out and said it directly. No.
And there were bulldozers located right across the street from the Digby Theater.
Yes.
Now, during the protest, you only heard the police give one warning, correct?
That's correct.
And you don't mention anything about Jersey Jackson being in a position to throw the brick or the rock?
I believe that they were, in a way.
No hand above her head or anything like that, though, right?
I believe I did see Jersey Jackson with their hand, holding something in their hand, up like this.
Up above her head?
Not above her head, exactly.
You state in your statement that her hand was by her side?
Yes.
And you don't even have any evidence of this alleged brick you yelled about, right?
I don't know.
That's a no.
No.
You have no evidence of the brick.
No.
And Miss Buchanan, after Miss Jackson was detained, you heard Officer Navarro say, "But we told you to clear out and you didn't," right?
Yes.
And Officer Navarro didn't mention anything at all about the rock.
Not to me, no.
You then say that Officer Navarro pushed Jersey Jackson into the squad car.
Yes, as far as I can see.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Dang, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Buchanan, why did you hire Ari Frankel for your initial inspection of the Digby Theater?
Ari Frankel has been doing work for Buchanan Properties for many, many years, and I've relied on him for many projects, and so I didn't see why there was any other reason not to.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Fetkiller.
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Buchanan, you may step down. Defense counsel, have any additional witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Eden Saab to the stand. Good afternoon, Ms. Saab.
Good evening.
Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my name is Eden Saab. I am 51 years old and I am a teacher at Borough High School. I teach history and I teach social studies, and I'm also a member of the CRC.
And what exactly is the CRC?
Well, this stands for the Chinook County Citizens Review Committee. We are an independent semi-governmental body that conducts civilian oversight and investigates allegations of misconduct. We're all unpaid, unelected citizens.
And what makes you qualified for your position at the CRC?
Well, when I was 7 years old, my mother found herself in the middle of a high-speed police chase. She was run off the road by a police officer and sustained some pretty serious spinal injuries. She has recovered, but it took her several years.
And what exactly do you have that qualifies you for the CRC?
Well, I have my bachelor's degree and my master's degree in history, and my master's thesis mostly focuses on modern American police forces of the early 1900s. And I also train police departments all over Oregon.
Now, moving on to today's case. Who did you personally interview for this case?
I personally interviewed Jersey Jackson, Officer Marlo Navarro, Camden Buchanan, and Danger Smith.
And what rules are put in place for crowd management?
Well, I believe that is part of the RPD Directive 0635.10.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like my co-counsel to present Exhibit 2. Now, Ms. Saab, could you please identify Exhibit 2 for the court?
Ms. Pollari, I believe Exhibit 2 was previously admitted into evidence, so you can just, you don't have to do all that. You can just
Thank you,
hand it over to the witness and start asking questions if you want.
Now, Ms. Saab, based on your interviews, can you say Officer Navarro did anything wrong?
I can conclude that Officer Navarro was following the RPD Directive 0635.10.
And even though the directive says that police officers must give 2 verbal warnings, what are the exceptions to this?
Well, the directive states that an officer may make an arrest if they see that someone poses a risk of violence or possible property damage.
And in your expert opinion, which of Jackson's rights were violated, if any?
Nothing could be concluded about Jersey Jackson's First Amendment rights being violated or even taken away.
And based on your research, what could you conclude about this case?
Officer Navarro did their job, and they did their job as an officer to immediately intervene and protect the public from an unsafe situation.
Thank you, Ms. Saab. No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Saab.
Good evening.
Ms. Saab, you did not attend either of the protests mentioned in this case, correct?
No, but I did interview Jersey Jackson and Officer Navarro.
So you did not see or hear what was happening when Miss Jackson was arrested?
No, but I did get firsthand information from Officer Navarro and Jersey Jackson.
Ms. Saab, you see yourself as an expert on policing, right?
Yes, that's true. I train police departments all over Oregon.
But you are a history teacher, correct?
Yes, I also teach social studies, and this is at Borough High School.
And you've also never been a police officer?
No, but I have for the past 15 years been a member of the Chinook County Citizens Review Committee.
Ms. Saab, are you aware that Miss Jackson was acting within her role as a journalist when she was arrested?
Yes.
And did you factor this into your conclusion?
Yes, I did interview Jersey Jackson.
Excuse me. Ms. Saab, you believe that Officer Navarro's arrest of Miss Jackson was reasonable, correct?
Yeah, and was following the training I gave while I was training the police departments.
Yet, in forming your conclusion, you never considered that Miss Jackson and Officer Navarro had met and had an altercation prior to the day of the arrest.
I guess so.
Ms. Saab, you are aware that one of the central claims in this case is whether Officer Navarro's arrest of Miss Jackson was reasonable, correct?
Yes.
And you did not consider the prior confrontation between Officer Navarro and Miss Jackson in your analysis?
Well, we as the CRC could not come to a conclusion one way or the other on the issue.
Ms. Saab, you interviewed Officer Navarro in the course of your investigation into the arrest, correct?
Yes.
And in that interview, you never ascertained whether Officer Navarro had retaliatory intent while arresting Miss Jackson?
I guess so.
Wait, let's see. Wait, yeah. I'm sorry. Can I have a moment, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Saab, even though you haven't worked as a police officer yourself, what experience do you have in that field?
Well, I have my bachelor's and I have my master's degree in history, and I provide training to police departments all over Oregon. I also write articles in scholarly journals like the American Journal of Police and major newspapers like Oregonian.
And what is the purpose of your investigation?
Well, the purpose of my investigation is to conclude if there is anything improper or irregular about it, not to determine if Jersey's rights were violated or if the previous encounter had any impact.
Thank you, Ms. Saab. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any further recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Saab. You may step down. Okay, so we'll take 30 seconds and allow the scoring judges to enter their comments. Okay, are the parties prepared to go forward with their closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff is prepared for their closing argument.
Defense counsel, are you also ready for closing?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Plaintiff, you may proceed with your closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. And once again, my name is Allison Corcoran, and if it is okay with you, I would like to reserve any unused time for rebuttal.
Absolutely.
Thank you. At the beginning of this trial, my colleague reminded you that as Americans, we value our freedom and our rights above all, specifically our First and Fourth Amendment rights to freedom of speech and protection from unreasonable search, seizure, and arrest. These messages of freedom are ingrained in us, and we all understand the importance of protecting them. Members of the jury, you just heard the story of a police officer who targeted my client, Miss Jersey Jackson, not only because of her position as a journalist, but in retaliation for Miss Jackson standing up for her rights, not because of any unlawful action. Miss Jackson thought she was protecting herself by wearing a shirt clearly identifying her as press. You learned that what she was actually doing was putting a target on her back. This targeted action must have consequences, which require us, as the plaintiff, to meet our burden to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not. That one, Miss Jackson engaged in speech protected under the First Amendment. 2, the defendant's arrest of her was substantially motivated by an effort to stop Miss Jackson from exercising these fundamental rights. And 3, that the defendant's arrest of Miss Jackson occurred without probable cause. We have met this burden. You heard Officer Marlo Navarro admit to threatening Miss Jackson and Danger Smith at the December 2019 protest after learning that Miss Jackson was a reporter. And you heard that how after Jackson stood up for herself and Mr. Smith, defendant became aggressive and again threatened arrest. The defendant clearly had not forgotten this incident when encountering Miss Jackson a second time at the protest on January 15th of 2020, the day Miss Jackson heroically stopped protester Danger Smith from wreaking havoc on the nonviolent protest. Members of the jury, does the defendant's claim to have seen a tiny rock in Miss Jackson's hand, yet not the bright, bold lettering on her shirt, make sense? You heard that the defendant was 100 feet away at the time and made no attempt to stop Miss Jackson during the time it took to run those 100 feet. Ask yourselves, wouldn't Miss Jackson have already thrown the rock if she'd wanted to? Additionally, expert audiologist Trini Redbird explained how extremely unlikely the defendant's claim to have actually heard a threat is, especially over the roar of the bulldozers. We, as the plaintiff, urge you to prevent Officer Navarro from targeting and crushing not only the rights of my client, but also the obligation of citizens to uphold these rights at all costs. Do not let Defendant Navarro set a precedent for violating the freedoms our country holds so dear. Thank you.
Responder?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury, I would like for you to put yourselves in the shoes of a working police officer. What is your duty? To ensure safety at a loud, rowdy, and chaotic protest. Imagine you suddenly hear a yell. A protester calls out, "Let's barricade the inside." You turn around and you see the protester who made the supposed statement with a rock in their right hand. You now have two options. Either wait for that rock to be thrown and for protesters to unsafely barricade themselves inside of an old theater, or immediately intervene and ensure that each and every protester is out of harm's way. Unsafe situations require immediate intervention. These were the thoughts of Officer Marlon Navarro as he decided to act rather than wait and hope for the best. In return, the plaintiff, Jersey Jackson, is suing Officer Navarro on the basis that Navarro has violated Jersey Jackson's First Amendment rights. Now, the plaintiff must prove their claims by a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, the plaintiff must persuade you, the jury, that their claims are more likely true than not true. Marlon Navarro testified to hearing someone in the crowd yell out to barricade inside the theater. And when he turned around, the person he saw had a rock raised in their right hand and was standing directly in front of the Digby Theater door. Immediately, he started running towards that potential threat, which he soon realized was Jersey Jackson. Jersey Jackson was arrested for one reason and one reason only. At that moment, she was a potential threat to public safety. Camden Buchanan additionally testified to hearing the yell as well as seeing Jersey Jackson with that rock standing directly beside the Digby Theater door. Finally, Eden Saab, an expert in the field of police misconduct, testified that Officer Navarro's conduct on January 15th of 2020 complied with the Rowe Police Department directive. The plaintiff is arguing that the arrest of Jersey Jackson by Officer Navarro was a violation of their First Amendment rights and founded on the basis of retaliation. I somewhat agree with the plaintiff. There certainly is an act of retaliation presenting itself in this case today. However, that act of retaliation is not coming from Officer Navarro, but Jersey Jackson herself. In reality, it was Jersey Jackson who believed the initial interaction with Officer Navarro was negative. It was Jersey Jackson who turned an otherwise normal interaction into a negative one by yelling into the defendant's face. This case is not in court today because of the bias and retaliation that Officer Navarro displayed, but because of the grudge the plaintiff has held against our defendant since their very first interaction. The plaintiff's second witness, Danger Smith, is one that testified to telling protesters to barricade themselves inside of the theater, and is also one that witnessed the fairly made arrest of Jersey Jackson. Their final witness, expert Trini Redbird, testified to the possibility of Marlon Navarro hearing the yell. This is a witness who did not conduct an on-site evaluation, who did not interview Officer Navarro, and therefore cannot attest to his comprehension. This is an expert who cannot be absolutely certain about any opinion made, as their evidence is completely estimated. The plaintiff's expert is one that provides no physical or accurate evidence to back up their testimony. It was upon the plaintiff to prove by preponderance of the evidence that there's greater than a 50% chance their claims are true. 2 out of 4 of the elements were not proven today. When it comes down to the violation of Jersey Jackson's First Amendment rights, there simply was no violation. The plaintiff failed in proving the preponderance of the evidence. The arrest of Jersey Jackson was not based on an agenda for retaliation, but based on Officer Navarro's duty to ensure the safety of the public from a credible threat. Officer Navarro immediately intervened in a situation that he perceived as unsafe, even dangerous. He did what he was trained to do as a police officer. What more could you possibly ask? He was motivated by the commitment he made the very day he chose to become a police officer, motivated by his duty to protect the rights of these citizens and fulfilling his duty to keep them safe on the day of January 15, 2020. We ask you, the jury, to dismiss the dismiss Jackson's complaint and to enter an award awarding Navarro the costs and disbursements that Officer Navarro faces in defending this action. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The trial is concluded. Lovely work,
Excuse
everyone.
me, Your Honor.
Yes.
May
Oh,
I
I'm
go
sorry.
for my rebuttal?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I almost took away your rebuttal. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead. Oh, that's terrible.
Timekeepers, I would like to inquire how much time I have left for my
I'm so sorry.
rebuttal.
You have 1 minute and 10 seconds left
Oh,
for
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Members of the jury, you learned today that the targeted arrest of Miss Jersey Jackson was an abuse of power by the defendant, motivated not by any threat, but by a goal of obstructing Miss Jackson's important right to report on a significant local story. You have the power to secure this protected freedom and ensure that our constitutional rights are preserved. We, the plaintiff, ask you to consider all of the evidence presented today and find Officer Marlo Navarro liable for the unlawful, targeted arrest of Miss Jersey Jackson. Thank you.
Okay, the trial is actually concluded now. Before we disperse to talk about MVP awards or anything else, are there any rule violation challenges?
No, Your Honor.
And defense?
None by the defense, Your Honor.
Okay, great. So at this time, I'm just trying to remember the order of things here. I think that we will take a 5-minute break, and you can meet with your teams determining the MVP awards, which will be Best Student Attorney and Best Student Witness on the opposing team. So we'll see you back in 5 minutes.
Yes, I have at least.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, let's proceed to the MVP awards. So plaintiff, or defense actually, we'll start with you. Can you, if you'd like to announce for us the outstanding plaintiff student attorney for this round?
So for the outstanding plaintiff student attorney for this round, we selected Hildy Harrington.
Hildy, where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay, I want to make sure I'm getting your name spelled correctly because I don't have a roster. Is it Harington? Correct. Okay, great. And defense counsel, the outstanding plaintiff team student witness.
In the outstanding plaintiff attorney, we picked Luke Fedeker.
Okay, and so I'm sorry, you're defense counsel. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay, Luke Fedeker, congratulations. It's Fetkether, or how do you, is that correct? Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, and okay, so defense counsel. Okay, so defense counsel. So this is back to, I can't remember who was speaking for defense counsel. Now there's so many of you, but anyway, whoever this person speaking for the plaintiff team or the defense team, you're the outstanding student witness on the plaintiff team.
Or do you mean the plaintiff, Your Honor? The defense has already given their names.
Okay, so I'm sorry. The outstanding student attorney for this round for the plaintiff side is Hildy Harrington, correct? And the outstanding student witness, Mr. Fetkether was an attorney, not a witness. So I think I'm looking for the witness.
It's Your Honor. So we nominated Hildy as the witness.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yep, that's fine. All right, and Luke is outstanding plaintiff attorney, nominated by the defense team. Great. Whoops. Okay, try to get this right going forward. if you guys have done this. I've done this many times, but not on this system. Okay, so plaintiff team, the outstanding student attorney on the plaintiff team.
Rose Banador, sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name.
It's okay, thank you.
Is that correct, Rose?
Yes.
Banador? I was saying Bandor and I realized there was an A I didn't notice. Okay, and plaintiff team, the outstanding student witness.
Eden Stubbs.
Okay, and Eden, where are you? I remember STOTS, is that right? How do you spell your last name, Eden?
ST.
Oh, Stubbs. There we go. Okay. Yeah, they gave us a roster for the previous round, but we don't have one. Okay, so congratulations to all of our, let's give a round of applause, however you want to do that, to our MVPs. And then we get to do a little bit of feedback. And so I will just introduce myself and then ask each of the scoring judges to introduce themselves and give a little bit of, give a few comments. So my name is Barbara Smythe. I'm an elder law attorney. My office is in Beaverton, and I practice in mostly the Tri-County area, sometimes, you know, down in Salem or some other places, but I do some trial work. It is all bench trials in my area. So I haven't done a jury trial in about, gosh, 25 years at least. But you know, bench trials are quite similar, just that the judge gets to be both parts, the judge and jury, basically. I coached mock trial for 8 years and have been to a whole lot of mock trial competitions. And I have also my son, who you'll meet soon, because we happen to get assigned to the same round this time, did high school and college mock trial. I'm gonna take like just a second, and I know you guys want me to talk about you, but I have to be generic. And so one thing, you're all awesome. There's a lot of talent on this group. I mean, and I can see some of you are on the younger side, and I can just see enormous potential in really both teams. It was a very, very close round, super hard to just, you know, super hard to talk, you know, choose really, or, you know, and unfortunately I'm not a scoring judge, but I mean, you guys, it was a very well matched round, and there was just a whole lot of talent on both teams in this group. So one of the things I just want to talk about mock trial and why it's good for you. And so I'm going to talk about David for a second. He's my youngest kid, and he's a recent Oregon State grad. But he, when he started mock trial his freshman year of high school, he had a speech impediment, and he had this habit of swallowing. Every time he would stand up in front of the class to talk, he would start just swallowing. It was like a nervous habit. And but you know, he turned out to be an actually really outstanding mock trialer. Went to some very highly selective competitions when he was a senior in high school, and then did mock trial at Oregon State, and you know, was very involved and successful in that program as well. And so you know, that is and you know, I think about my daughter too. She's a business manager, and when she has to do a tough presentation to scarily, you know, people in her company that she doesn't know, and then of course now they're all on Zoom, right? I mean, she says it's nothing compared to what she had to do in mock trial. So it makes it easier down the road, and you know, you really do grow through this process. And I've seen so many people, and I can see several of you look to me like you're maybe on the younger side, and you know, it is not where you are, it's where you go. And you know, it's the people who I see really benefit from this are the folks that just continue to just take the next step, you know, like one step forward, and you know, learning to you know, when I used to be young and snow skied a lot, we'd always say you get extra points for a good wipeout, and if you can stand up again when you're done. So that's one of the great things you learn in mock trial. But anyway, just to stop talking about me, it was a very enjoyable round, and just a whole lot of talent on this team. And I was just, you know, specifically, I was impressed with the, you know, I thought the crosses and directs were good. I thought, you know, really the statements were good. Ms. Bonador, your close was very nice. It was very impressive. You've got some talent, and I thought there were some really great objections battles. I was impressed with the level of knowledge that a lot of you have and the level of sort of pickiness and specificity you're able to express in your objections and really fighting it out there. So that was very impressive and I enjoyed it. And I will go next perhaps to Ms. Shen, one of our scoring judges who is somewhere. There you are.
Oh, hello.
I'll let you have the floor.
Yeah, just going off of Barbara, sorry, I can't see your last name, but Barbara,
Yeah,
really impressed with the councils from both sides asking some really good questions during cross and direct, either to establish the credibility or to, attack the credibility of the witnesses on the stand. And you guys all seemed really professional and composed. The closing arguments were very persuasive as well. Fantastic job, very impressive.
And Ms. Carolyn, would you tell them who you are and sort of what you do?
I'm a first-year law student at Lewis and Clark Law School. And I'm just about to do my first oral argument in a couple of months. So it's great that you guys are getting some practice in like high school. This is great.
Okay, and our other scoring judge.
Hi, I'm David Smythe. I'm a legal assistant also in Beaverton. You can guess who I work for. But I did mock trial in high school and college for a total of 6 years. I was the vice president of the Oregon State mock trial team. Yeah, Barbara had already spoken plenty about my mock trial life.
Used to swallow funny when he was in 9th grade. Sorry.
Yeah. So you were all great, and it was it's really interesting to see how mock trial sort of works on Zoom as opposed to in person, because I'd never really seen that before today. I just took a few notes, sort of just general things that I think can really be helpful from some of the things I saw in the trial today, which is, so if you have like an objection fight that you expect you're going to have, or you expect to object to something that the other team's going to bring in, something that I've found to be really, really helpful is if you just dig into the rules and figure out exactly what you're going to use and then what the other team's going to use, and just plan out that whole objection battle as far and as thoroughly as you can. And even if you know how, like, if you have some piece of evidence that probably shouldn't be admitted, but you have a really, really well-prepared objection response for it, there's a good chance you'll probably get it in, because if the other team hasn't thoroughly prepared how they're going to deal with that, you're going to look super confident in your argument and have something prepared. And another note that I wanted to mention was on outside the scope of the mock trial materials, which is sort of a unique thing to high school mock trial, but that's fine. You absolutely can object that something is outside of the scope. But let's say if you're crossing a witness and that witness just completely makes up some total BS that isn't in their affidavit, what I would recommend is, instead of objecting at that point and saying this is outside the scope, they can't say that, is wait for your cross-examination and then embarrass the witness with it and basically say, okay, well, and I don't know if this actually happened in trial today, but I know there were a few outside the scope things. I don't know the case well enough to know what is and isn't in the case, but and you can impeach, and you can still impeach in high school mock trial, right? You can impeach the witness if they lie. So if they make something up, they look a lot worse when you pull up their affidavit and say, can you show me where you actually wrote this down in your affidavit, as opposed to winning an objection earlier during the direct examination. So those are just two little things that I think you can sort of help plan out your strategy for things in advance to kind of make the evidence look as good for your side as possible, and sort of make your objections sort of be as effective as possible at getting both the evidence that you want in, and also sort of being ready and prepared for the most unpredictable part of mock trial, which is objections, of course.
Great. Okay. Anything else? From either of the scoring judges? All right. I think that is pretty much everything. So my final parting thought is say a great big thank you to your coach, and send them flowers or something, because and your parents, they have put in a lot, and I know that you've put in an enormous amount of work, every one of you. This is a huge undertaking to prepare these trials. Do particular, your coaches really are the folks that make this possible. I'm here for one day right now, but they're with you throughout the whole season preparing for this thing, and they're just putting their heart and soul into this. I know that, and so just be sure to give them, a fist bump or something before you go home tonight. And that is all I have to say, and I think that we are concluded.
Thank you so much for judging our round, everyone, the scoring judges and the presiding judge. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys did a wonderful job. Now go rest.
Thank you. Bye.